begins on January 2nd. Check it out. And speaking of, it's always the right time for our next guest, who you know from TV, ESPN Radio, and he's got his own podcast, too, The Right Time with Bomani Jones. Bomani, good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Also from ESPN Radio's Russillo and Kane, Will Kane in the house. Will, good to see you this morning as well.
See you, too.
Gentlemen, let's do this. Malcolm Jenkins has announced he will no longer raise his fist in protest during the national anthem. This after Jenkins agreed earlier this week to an $89 million deal with the NFL, who will donate the money to causes supporting social justice without the consent of nearly 40 members of the player coalition, including Eric Reed and Colin Kaepernick. Bomani, you're our guest, so I will start with you. Is this the right move?
This is interesting for Malcolm Jenkins because he's starting to look a little funny in the light, I think, to some people. And I don't know what exactly is going on, but I talked to one player in the coalition, and his response was, someone's lying. The fact that he doesn't know who the person is that's lying isn't a good look for people, especially after Eric Reed did the interview with Slate, where he said that someone from the league had talked to him and asked if this agreement was done, would he stop protesting? And then magically Malcolm Jenkins turns up that same day and says he will no longer raise his fist. I don't think that's a good look for anybody involved in this.
Will?
Well, look, I'm hesitant to go first. Second, I'd rather hear from Stephen A. and Bomani before I respond, but if you want Stephen A., I'm happy to go.
Go ahead. Oh, no, go. I want to hear you first.
Well, look, here's the thing. I don't want to be any fly in the ointment, you know. From the beginning, as I've had a voice of dissent on these protests, it hasn't been because of a lack of desire to see progress on issues that we can all agree on. The issue is on what issues do we agree and what issues do we disagree. The fact that there's now disagreement between players in the Players Coalition is nothing at all for anyone to be happy about. This is a shame because you would love to see these guys move forward on some semblance of progress that they can agree on. I have respected Malcolm Jenkins throughout this entire process. I have thought the way he has conducted himself has been exemplary, primarily because I felt like Malcolm is looking very intently for a solution. Now, I don't know if $89 million coming from the owners is a solution, but I feel like it's a start. I feel like, you know, getting these guys to contribute $89 million over 7 years to some, and we'll see what the causes are. We know they include the United Negro College Fund, Dream Corps, whatever the Players Coalition hopes to donate to. But I think that's something to be proud of. I think Anquan Bolden and Malcolm Jenkins should be proud of that.
Well, I'm not thinking about being proud or anything like that. I get where Bomani's coming from in terms of how suspect Malcolm Jenkins may look in the eyes of some people. I just don't think Malcolm Jenkins nor anybody else should care at this particular juncture. You have to remember that when they were protesting, you're protesting inequality, oppression, police brutality, the relationships of disenfranchised community with law enforcement officials, to be specific. And because those were the issues that you were protesting, you weren't necessarily protesting against the NFL, but the NFL was suffering because of it, because NFL players were taking these positions. And as a result, there's a segment of our populace who turned against the league itself. It affected ratings, it affected revenue, and obviously that means the bottom line was being affected. So if you're Malcolm Jenkins, what you're saying is, okay, we have a situation where owners are willing to give close to $100 million to worthy causes, to assist in worthy causes that directly affect and impact minority communities throughout this country. We still don't know all the details, so I'm not going to go out front and center and acting like this is a finished product by any stretch of the imagination. But in the same breath, if you're Malcolm Jenkins and you're saying the objective and the goal was to bring attention and to get assistance in addressing these issues from billionaire owners with cachet to help provoke change, then I think that's a significant step in the right direction. And if that's what's transpiring, I don't think that Malcolm Jenkins should be concerned about how anybody else is looking at him in regards to that.
Let's take a big picture look at it. For people who think this is a good look, it's like, look, you got $89 million to good causes out of the owners, so he stops protesting. If it's a bad look, oh, so your speech is worth $89 million. Even if it's to charity, still they kind of bought you off. I take a bigger look than that. The protest began with Colin Kaepernick because he said, forget about specifically interactions between law enforcement and communities of color for a second. It's the basic gist of it is, I don't feel right standing for this when there is social injustice I mean, that's the big picture. And when Trump went at the players and said they should be forced to stand. Then everyone lockstep said, wait a minute. And it became a bigger issue. And really, what we're talking about is if that's in Malcolm Jenkins' heart, he feels good now about standing because he extracted money or the money was extracted from the owners, that's fine. But the protest really wasn't about the NFL. It wasn't say, hey, NFL, do more for communities. It was really, I don't feel good, said Colin Kaepernick, about standing for this anthem right now, given what's going on. I don't know how the NFL really addresses that, which is why I think ultimately, even if they gave $1 billion, that's great that they did, but is that really what the protest is about? The protest is not about the NFL, which is why I've said from the beginning, or when we started talking and thinking about this, the only solution, it seems to me, that would be satisfactory in terms of ending the so-called protests is to say, fine, we'll have a ceremony. It's not compulsory. We won't have you on the field, but you can stay in the locker room during the ceremony. That seems to me to address things. Otherwise,
go ahead, Bomani.
Hold on, here's my question. What do you think the NFL cares more about? Do you think they care more about these issues affecting people of color, or do you think they care more about getting guys to stop protesting during the national anthem?
The latter.
Because if they cared about these issues, yeah, it's the latter. Okay, and that's why it's important what exactly Malcolm Jenkins is doing. Because if he's cutting a deal on the side with the NFL, then everything about him becomes suspect. And if he's the face of the movement, then you have to ask yourself, is the movement now about whatever issue we were talking about, or is it about the NFL just shutting down the protest? Because what worried me about what I saw about where the money is supposed to go and everything else, the United Negro College Fund, I mean, that's appreciated, but what in the world does that have to do with police brutality? College degree is not going to stop you from getting smoked by the police. We are talking about these issues as though about the relationship between law enforcement and the community. The issue is not about a relationship. You're not going to go to a counselor and talk it out and everything being okay. The issue is the violence that is put upon people who live in these places. So just saying that we got the NFL to give some money, yeah, I think if you take the money and you put it in a good place, that's probably got a level of effectiveness to it. There's a question to be raised as to whether or not the protests as they are doing anything new. So if you can use that to get something that's helpful, that's fine, but you can't get help if the owners themselves don't care about what the issues are.
And I've seen no demonstration that the owners care. But what, in other words, like the protest wasn't about, hey, NFL owners, we're protesting because you're not doing enough about policing issues as it relates to police brutality and communities of color. The issue was standing for the anthem, right? So, like, I understand what you're saying, and I largely agree with it, but why would that end the protest?
Because if you can get the NFL and those owners to put some weight behind what it is that you're doing that's actually moving toward these causes, I think that's something that you wind up considering in that place. The ability to say something for its own intrinsic value is kind of suspect. But if you can get some actual help in that direction, I could understand why people would say that I get more out of this relationship with the NFL than I get out of this overt protest. But what are they actually getting out of the NFL if the NFL controls the board 7-5 that's going to ultimately make the decisions, which means that people that don't actually care about these issues have the control of where the money goes, and that is why you would not want to wind up making any such trade. But I think if you can get something functional so that you can put your hands on, then I would understand why somebody would then say maybe the protest is not something that we're going to do if we've gotten a tangible gain from it.
But Bomani, I alluded to that yesterday very significantly, and nobody's disagreeing with that point. The point, however, is this. Obviously, it's not just about money. It's about where that money is going to go. It's whatever other level of cachet that the owners are going to exercise in order to induce change to address the issues that need to be addressed. But in the same breath, what we heard, because Damian Woody came on the show just a couple of days ago, and we were told the issue that the players had in terms of their own divide is that you have players wanting credit. You have players wanting their own issues addressed, issues that they didn't necessarily bring to the table. You don't have the union at the forefront of this issue the way that they should be, because you have individual players coming across as a divided front, and that certainly doesn't assist this quest that they supposedly were on in trying to address the changes that needed to take place within our respective community. Of course, it's welcome to politics, but that's a reality of the situation. So I'm saying, if you're Malcolm Jenkins, you can't be concerned about how people with different agendas are looking at you if their agenda is suspect. Now, we don't know. We really don't know, Bomani. But if their agenda is suspect and you're Malcolm Jenkins and you are aiming for what Bomani Jones has alluded to, then there shouldn't be a problem because you know your heart and your actions are in the right place and the actions will validate that.
If I may, this is, as you just described, Stephen A., this is the essence of politics. It's bringing people together, people that want credit, people that want transparency, finding compromise. This is what the players are now engaged in. They are engaged in politics wholeheartedly. Bomani, you said something that I thought I disagreed with, but by the time you came around, I think we might be on the same page. What does it matter what the owners care about? What does it matter if they want people to stand for the national anthem? Hold on, if I may. What does it matter if they want people to stand for the national anthem or they want to actually contribute to these causes? In the end, if they're just helping towards a solution. I think I see your point when you say, well, if it's 5 and 5 and 2 swinging votes on how this money's spent, then their intentions actually become important. But see, this has been a source of disagreement with you and me, Bomani, from the beginning, and definitely with you and me, Max, is are we here for solutions? Are we here to find progress forward? Because this isn't about the anthem. It isn't about staying in the locker room. It's about finding things you can move forward to. I agree, Bomani, it's about police brutality, but we've also talked about this being systemic and institutional. And at some point when you're giving and contributing $89 million to so many different good causes, you got to ask, aren't we helping move forward on these issues?
No, because there is not progress there if the people behind it do not actually care, because then all you have is basically public relations is what it winds up being. So when you ask, does it matter that the owners care? It matters because you're not going to have some level of progress if the owners do not actually care. Now, Stephen A. said something about
Would you rather have their
Malcolm
money
Jenkins.
or their heart?
Oh, no. You need their hearts. Let me tell you, they could do a whole lot more with their hearts than they could do with their money. If they went and showed up the way that people honor veterans when they come back home and things like that, for example, if the NFL were to honor someone who lost their loved one to police brutality under one of those circumstances, that would go way farther than the $250,000 they talk about chipping in individually. They would
This was never quid pro quo.
Hold on, Max.
It wasn't supposed to be in.
Except it looks like it's quid pro quo if the guy that's in front of the
We're coming back.
Gentlemen, we're coming right back. Don't worry, just a commercial break. We're going to continue this conversation. We also need to address another angle after the break as well. Donald Trump, there was an interesting poll